Millionaire finds twins asking for a piece of bread. One of the boys had his late wife's birthmark. He cries to find out the truth. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The December wind cut through downtown Chicago like a knife, but Robert "Bobby" Harrison barely felt it as he stepped out of his silver Bentley. At 62, the real estate mogul had everything money could buy, except the one thing that mattered most. 6 years had passed since Sarah's funeral, and the emptiness still gnawed at his chest like a hungry beast. "Just picking up the contracts, Mr. Harrison," his driver called out, but Bobby was already walking toward the gleaming office tower that bore his name, Harrison Holdings, built from nothing but determination and heartbreak. That's when he saw them. Two small figures huddled by the building's entrance, barely visible in the shadows. Blonde hair catching the streetlight, thin jackets inadequate against the bitter cold. Boys, maybe 7 or 8 years old, clutching each other with the desperate grip of survivors. "Please, mister," the smaller one whispered as Bobby approached. "Just a piece of bread. We're really hungry." Bobby's heart clenched. He'd built a fortune, owned half the city's skyline, but children begging on his doorstep. This was unacceptable. He knelt down, studying their faces. Identical blue eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same. His breath caught in his throat. The boy on the left turned slightly, and there it was. A small, crescent-shaped birthmark behind his left ear, exactly where Sarah used to trace her finger when she thought about the children they'd never had. The same birthmark she'd shown him in old family photos, passed down through generations of her bloodline. "What's your name, son?" Bobby's voice barely worked. "Tommy," the boy said. "This is my brother Billy." The world tilted. Bobby's hands trembled as memories flooded back. Sarah's tears when the doctors said she couldn't conceive, her stories about the crescent mark that ran in her family, her final words in the hospital about secrets she'd never told him. "Where's your mother?" he managed to ask. The boys exchanged a look that held too much knowledge for their young faces. "She told us never to talk about that," Billy whispered, fear creeping into his voice. "She said bad things happen when we talk about Mommy." Bobby's vision blurred. 6 years of grief, 6 years of questions about Sarah's mysterious past, 6 years of wondering why she'd sometimes disappear for hours without explanation. And now these children, carrying her family's mark, standing homeless in the Chicago cold. Something was very, very wrong here. But as he reached out to touch Tommy's face, both boys stepped back in terror, as if his gentle gesture might bring down the wrath of God himself. "Don't tell anyone you saw us," Tommy pleaded, pulling his brother away. "Please, mister, don't tell anyone." They turned to run, but Bobby's voice stopped them cold. "Wait!" His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. I think I might have known your mother." The boys froze, and in that moment, Bobby Harrison realized his carefully ordered world was about to shatter completely. "Boys, wait!" Bobby called out, his voice echoing off the empty street like a desperate prayer. Tommy and Billy stopped running but didn't turn around. Their small shoulders shook. Whether from cold or fear, Bobby couldn't tell. But his heart was already breaking for them. The wind whipped through the Chicago streets, carrying the scent of snow and desperation. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for the children like grasping fingers. Bobby approached them slowly, carefully, as if they were wild animals who might bolt at any sudden movement. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently, his voice softer than he'd used in years. "My name is Bobby Harrison. I was married to a woman named Sarah Matthews, before she became Sarah Harrison." Billy's head snapped around, his blue eyes wide with shock and something that looked like hope. "You knew our mommy." His voice cracked on the word mommy, and Bobby felt his chest tighten. "I think so," Bobby whispered, dropping to one knee on the cold concrete. She died 6 years ago, didn't she? Tommy nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes and threatening to spill over. The bad man said we could never tell anyone she was our mommy. He said if we did, we'd disappear forever, just like the other kids who talk too much. A chill ran down Bobby's spine that had nothing to do with the December wind. Other kids? How many children were caught in this web of secrets and fear? What bad man? Who's been taking care of you? Bobby asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Different people, Billy said quietly, his voice barely audible above the city noise. They move us around a lot, foster homes, group homes, sometimes just people who get paid to watch us. We're not supposed to stay in one place too long, or ask questions, or talk about where we came from. Bobby knelt down again, his expensive suit soaking up moisture from the sidewalk. His mind was racing, trying to piece together a puzzle that made less sense with every revelation. Sarah had vanished for 3 days, 7 years ago. She'd come back different, distant, claiming she'd been visiting a sick aunt he'd never heard of. Then she'd gotten sick herself, cancer that took her so quickly the doctors were baffled. "Boys, I need you to trust me," he said, looking into their eyes, Sarah's eyes. "I have a big house with warm beds and all the food you could want. Hot chocolate, pizza, anything you like. Will you let me help you?" The twins looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that only siblings share. Bobby could see them weighing options, calculating risks the way no 7-year-old should have to. Finally, Tommy spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Our mommy told us about you. She said you were the kindest man in the whole world. But we could never ever find you because it would put you in danger too. She said you had a big heart that could love everyone, but that made you vulnerable to bad people." Bobby's world shifted again, reality rearranging itself like pieces of a shattered mirror. Sarah had known. Somehow she'd known these boys existed, and she'd kept them, and him, apart. But why? What was she protecting him from? "Well," Bobby said, forcing a smile through his tears, "I think it's time we found out what your mommy was so afraid of, because whatever it was, we're going to face it together." The Harrison mansion sat like a fortress in Lincoln Park, its Gothic revival architecture imposing against the winter sky. Warm light spilled from every window, creating a beacon of safety in the darkness. Bobby watched as Tommy and Billy stood frozen on his doorstep, overwhelmed by the grandeur that surrounded them, the carved stone lions, the brass fixtures, the leaded glass windows that sparkled like jewels. "This is where Mommy came sometimes," Tommy whispered, reaching out to touch the brass doorknob with reverence. "She told us about the big staircase with the red carpet and the pictures on the walls of all the fancy people." Bobby's blood ran cold. Sarah had brought them here? When? How? He'd been traveling extensively during the last year of her life, building the West Coast expansion, chasing deals that now seemed insignificant compared to this moment. Those mysterious absences he'd attributed to doctor visits, to her need for space during her illness. "She said you had a library with more books than the whole Chicago Public Library," Billy added, his eyes wide as they stepped into the marble foyer. "And a kitchen where a nice lady made cookies that tasted like heaven." "Maria!" Bobby called, his voice echoing through the grand hallway. His housekeeper appeared instantly, her kind face softening at the sight of the children. Maria Gonzalez had worked for the Harrisons for 15 years, becoming more family than employee after Sarah's death. "Senor Harrison, who are these beautiful boys? They look like little angels." "Maria, meet Tommy and Billy. They'll be staying with us for as long as they need to. Could you prepare the guest rooms on the 2nd floor, the ones with the connecting bathroom, and maybe get them something to eat? They look like they haven't had a proper meal in days." And as Maria fussed over the twins, speaking to them in the mixture of English and Spanish that had always charmed Sarah, Bobby retreated to his study. The room still smelled faintly of Sarah's perfume, even after 6 years. Her portrait dominated one wall, a commissioned piece that captured not just her beauty, but the intelligence and kindness that had made him fall in love with her. With hands that shook more than he cared to admit, Bobby unlocked the safe behind the portrait. Inside, Sarah's personal effects waited like sleeping secrets: her grandmother's jewelry, love letters from their courtship, her wedding ring, too painful to look at, too precious to store anywhere else, and a sealed envelope marked, "For Bobby, when the time comes," in her careful teacher's script. He'd never opened it, too afraid of what final words she might have left, too terrified that reading them would make her death final in a way that even the funeral hadn't. Now he tore it open with desperate fingers, his heart hammering against his ribs. "My darling Bobby," the letter began, and just seeing her handwriting made his eyes blur with tears. "If you're reading this, then they've found you. I pray you'll understand why I had to lie, why I had to hurt you, why I had to make choices that probably looked like betrayals but were acts of love." Bobby sank into his leather chair, the chair where Sarah used to curl up and read while he worked late into the night. "The boys are mine, born from a mistake I made before I met you. No, that's not right. Not a mistake. A sacrifice. Their father is not a good man, Bobby. He's dangerous, connected to people who don't forgive or forget, who see human lives as currency to be spent. I gave them up to keep them safe, but I've been watching over them from afar, making sure they were fed, housed, protected as much as possible within a broken system." Bobby stared at Sarah's letter until the words blurred together, memories flooding back with the force of a dam bursting. 7 years ago seemed like a lifetime, and yesterday all at once. Marcus Blackwood, the name alone made his skin crawl, had cornered Sarah outside Giuseppe's, their favorite Italian restaurant, the place where they'd had their first date. "Your husband thinks he's untouchable, Mrs. Harrison," Blackwood had said, his voice smooth as silk over steel. "But everyone has pressure points. Everyone has something they can't bear to lose." Bobby had arrived just as Sarah was backing away, her face pale as moonlight. Blackwood had simply smiled, tipped his hat like some old-world gentleman, and disappeared into the crowd. That night Sarah had been quiet, distant, jumping at every sound. "Bobby," she'd said, her voice strange and hollow, "if something ever happened to me, would you be able to move on, to find happiness again?" "Nothing's going to happen to you," he'd replied, pulling her close. "I won't let it." But he had let it happen, hadn't he? The next morning she was gone. "I have to handle something," she'd said in her voicemail, her voice breaking on the words. "Don't look for me, Bobby. Please, this is bigger than us, and I need to fix it before it destroys everything we've built. I'll explain when I get back." But she never had explained. She'd returned 3 days later, pale and shaken, moving like a woman walking through her own nightmare. She'd claimed she'd been with her Aunt Clara, an aunt who, Bobby later discovered when he tried to send flowers, had died 5 years earlier. Now, watching Tommy and Billy devour Maria's homemade sandwiches in the kitchen, the pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. The boys were 7 years old. Sarah's mysterious absence had been exactly 7 years and 9 months ago. "Mr. Bobby?" Tommy's voice broke through his thoughts. The boy was holding up a framed photo from the mantel. Sarah at their wedding, radiant in white lace, her crescent birthmark barely visible beneath her veil. "That's our mommy!" Bobby's throat closed up completely. Yes, she was. She was the most beautiful woman in the world, inside and out. "She used to cry when she talked about you," Tommy said quietly, setting the photo down with careful hands. "She said she loved you so much it hurt, like having a piece of her heart walking around outside her body. But she could never come home because the bad man would hurt you if she did. She said you were the best part of her life," Billy added, his small voice carrying a weight that no child should bear. She said she'd rather die than let anyone hurt you because of her mistakes. The truth hit Bobby like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making his knees weak. Sarah hadn't abandoned him. She'd sacrificed herself to protect him. She'd given up everything, including her own children, to keep Marcus Blackwood from destroying the life they'd built together. "Boys," Bobby said carefully, crouching down to their eye level. "This bad man you mentioned, did he have black hair and a scar on his left hand?" A scar that looked like a crescent moon. Both twins recoiled as if struck, their faces going white with terror. "You know him?" Billy whispered, his small body trembling. "Don't say his name," Tommy pleaded, grabbing his brother's arm. "They told us terrible things happen when people say his name. That he can hear it wherever he is, and he comes for children who aren't supposed to know about him." But Bobby's blood had turned to ice water in his veins, because through the lace curtains of the kitchen window, he could see a familiar black sedan parked across the street. The same kind of car that had followed him 7 years ago, before Sarah's disappearance, before his world fell apart the first time. Marcus Blackwood was still alive, and somehow he'd found them. The black sedan remained parked across the street like a patient predator, its tinted windows reflecting the mansion's warm lights back like dead eyes. Bobby drew the curtains closed, with hands that shook despite his best efforts to remain calm. 7 years of peace, 7 years of believing that chapter of his life was closed, 7 years of healing from Sarah's loss. And now it was all unraveling like a cheap sweater. "Maria," he called quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "Take the boys upstairs and help them get settled in their rooms. Make sure they stay away from the windows, and if anyone comes to the door who isn't me or my security team, I want you to take them to the safe room. Do you understand?" Maria's face went pale. She'd worked for the Harrisons long enough to know that Bobby didn't make dramatic requests without good reason. "Senor Harrison, is everything all right? Should I call the police?" Bobby forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "Everything's going to be fine, Maria. I'm just being extra cautious with the boys here. You know how much they've been through." But nothing was fine, and they both knew it. As soon as Maria disappeared upstairs with the twins, their voices echoing down the hallway as she showed them their rooms, Bobby was on his phone, calling his head of security. "Marcus Rodriguez speaking. Rodriguez, it's Bobby Harrison. I need a full security detail at the house, and I need it 10 minutes ago. Full perimeter, armed response team, the works." "Sir, has something happened? Should I alert the authorities?" "Not yet. And Rodriguez, I need you to run deep background on Marcus Blackwood, everything you can find from the past 7 years. Financial records, property holdings, known associates, criminal activity. I don't care if you have to call in favors from the FBI. I want to know everything. Blackwood. But sir, I thought he was dead? So did I. Apparently we were both wrong." While he waited for his security team to arrive, Bobby found himself drawn back to the kitchen, where the evidence of normalcy remained. 2 empty plates, crumbs from Maria's sandwiches, glasses still half full of milk. Such simple things, but they represented something precious: childhood, innocence, the possibility of safety. Tommy had left his worn deck of cards on the table, the edges soft from countless games. Bobby picked them up, remembering Sarah's love of card games, how she'd taught him to play gin rummy during their honeymoon. "Mr. Bobby." Tommy's voice came from the doorway. Both boys stood there in pajamas that Maria had found, probably left over from some charity drive. They looked so small, so vulnerable. "Are the bad people coming?" Billy asked, his blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, wide with fear. Bobby wanted to lie, to reassure them that everything was fine, but these children had lived with deception and half-truths their entire short lives. They deserved honesty, even if it was frightening. "I think they might be," he said quietly. But I want you to know something important. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Not ever. Do you understand? Tommy stepped forward, his small hand reaching for Bobby's much larger one. Our mommy said you were brave. She said you'd fight dragons for people you loved. She also said you loved us even before you met us, Billy added, moving to Bobby's other side. She said love doesn't always need to see someone to be real. Bobby's heart clenched. Sarah had prepared them for this moment, had given them the tools to trust him even in the face of danger. But as car doors slammed outside and footsteps approached the house, he wondered if love would be enough to protect them from what was coming. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice boys, Harrison. Shame if something happened to them. You have something I want. Let's make a deal. The war Sarah had died trying to prevent had finally come to his doorstep. But this time, Bobby Harrison was ready to fight. Bobby's hands shook as he read the text message again, each word burning itself into his memory like acid. Upstairs, he could hear the twins laughing with Maria as she helped them brush their teeth, their innocent joy a stark contrast to the darkness closing in around them like a tightening noose. His security chief, Marcus Rodriguez, burst through the front door with 3 armed men behind him, their faces grim with professional concern. Rodriguez had been with Bobby for 8 years, ever since a kidnapping attempt on Sarah had made them both realize that wealth came with deadly prices. Sir, we've got movement all around the perimeter. At least 6 vehicles, all with blocked plates and professional surveillance equipment. This isn't random. Someone's been planning this operation for weeks, maybe months. It's Blackwood, Bobby said grimly, his voice carrying the weight of old nightmares. After all these years, he's come to collect what he thinks I owe him. I thought Blackwood was dead, sir. The federal task force confirmed it 3 years ago. So did I. Bobby locked his phone and headed for the gun safe, concealed behind his father's military medals. Rodriguez, I need you to prepare for immediate evacuation. Get the boys out of here. Take them to the safe house in Milwaukee, and don't tell anyone, not even me, which route you're using. Sir, what about you? I'm not leaving you here alone to face whatever this is. I'm going to end this once and for all. Sarah died protecting me from this monster, and I'll be damned if I let her sacrifice be for nothing. But before Rodriguez could respond, the lights went out with a finality that made Bobby's blood run cold. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing the mansion in an eerie red glow that made everything look like a scene from hell. Through the windows, Bobby could see figures moving in the darkness, too many figures, all armed, all moving with military precision. "Daddy Bobby!" Tommy's voice called from the top of the stairs, using a term that made Bobby's heart clench with unexpected emotion. "What's happening? Why are all the lights red?" "Stay upstairs with Maria!" Bobby shouted back, but it was too late. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke, the concussion knocking pictures from the walls and sending the crystal chandelier swaying like a pendulum. Marcus Blackwood stepped through the smoke like a spectre from Bobby's darkest nightmares. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes held the same cold calculation that had haunted Bobby's dreams for 7 years. He was flanked by 6 men in tactical gear, their weapons trained on everyone in the room. "Hello, Harrison. Miss me?" Blackwood's voice was exactly as Bobby remembered, smooth, cultured, hiding violence behind a veneer of civilization. "I thought you were dead," Bobby managed, his hand moving slowly toward his own weapon. Blackwood laughed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with winter wind. "I've been in federal protection, actually. Traded some very interesting information about Chicago's power brokers for a new identity and a clean slate. But when I heard about 2 little boys with very distinctive birthmarks showing up at your door..." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Bobby had ever seen. "How did you know?" Bobby's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. I've been watching them for months, waiting for the right moment. You see, Sarah thought she was so clever, hiding them in the system, moving them around like chess pieces on a board she thought she controlled. But she never understood that they were never the prize I was after. Then what? You are, Harrison. You always were. Blackwood's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp for a human mouth. Those boys aren't just Sarah's children, though she did an admirable job raising them to be the perfect weapons against you. The world tilted on its axis. Bobby felt like he was falling through space, every assumption he'd made crumbling into dust around him. "That's impossible," he whispered. But even as he said it, he could see the truth in Blackwood's eyes. DNA doesn't lie, my friend. Sarah came to me 7 years ago, desperate to protect you from my collection efforts. She offered herself as collateral for your considerable debts. 9 months later, she gave birth to my sons. Tommy and Billy appeared at the top of the stairs, their faces pale with terror, Maria's protective arms around them. But even in his shock, Bobby could see it now. The shape of Blackwood's jaw in their faces, the coldness that sometimes flickered behind their innocent eyes. "But here's the beautiful part," Blackwood continued, his voice filled with sick satisfaction. "She raised them to love you, to trust you, to see you as their savior. And now they're going to be the instrument of your complete destruction." Bobby's world collapsed as he realized the terrible truth. Sarah hadn't just sacrificed herself to save him. She'd created the very weapon that would destroy them all. The silence that followed Blackwood's revelation stretched like a chasm between past and present. Bobby stared at the twins on the staircase, seeing them now through a lens that distorted everything he thought he knew. Tommy and Billy clung to Maria, their small bodies trembling with a fear that went beyond the immediate danger, as if they'd always sensed this moment would come. "You're lying," Bobby said, but his voice lacked conviction. The pieces fit too well, explained too much about Sarah's final years, her mysterious guilt, her desperate need to protect him from something she could never name. "Am I?" Blackwood gestured to one of his men, who produced a manila folder thick with documents, paternity tests, birth certificates, medical records. Sarah was quite thorough in documenting everything, probably planning to tell you someday. She always was sentimental about the truth. Bobby's hands shook as he opened the folder. There, in clinical black and white, was proof that shattered his understanding of everything. DNA matches, hospital records showing Sarah's admission under an assumed name, photographs of her during pregnancy, photos that stabbed through his heart like daggers. "She loved you, you know," Blackwood continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than destroying a man's soul. "Even when she was carrying my children, she talked about you constantly, made me rather jealous, actually." "Stop." Bobby's voice was barely a whisper. "She used to cry during labor, calling your name. The nurses thought it was touching, a woman thinking of her beloved husband during childbirth. They had no idea she was mourning the man she'd betrayed to save." "I said stop!" Bobby roared, his composure finally cracking. Rodriguez and his men tensed, hands moving to weapons, but Blackwood merely smiled. "The boys know, of course," Blackwood said, his eyes finding Tommy and Billy on the stairs. "Don't you, children? You've always known who your real father is." Tommy's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. "We're sorry, Mr. Bobby. We wanted to tell you, but Mama made us promise. She said the truth would hurt you more than the lies." Billy stepped forward, his small chin raised in defiance that reminded Bobby painfully of Sarah. "But we don't care about blood. You're our real daddy, the one Mama told us about, the one who would love us no matter what." Blackwood's laughter filled the mansion like poison gas. "How touching. Sarah trained them well, didn't she? Perfect little weapons designed to break your heart." He stepped closer, his men moving with him. "But here's what she didn't tell you, Harrison. The boys aren't just my biological children. They're my legal heirs, which means I have every right to take them." Over my dead body, Bobby growled. That can be arranged. Blackwood's smile turned predatory. But I'm feeling generous tonight. I'll make you a deal. Sign over controlling interest in Harrison Holdings, liquidate your assets, and transfer everything to my offshore accounts. Do that, and I'll let you keep the boys. Refuse, and I'll take them anyway, plus everything you own through the courts. Either way, I win. Bobby looked up at the twins, saw the terror in their eyes, the desperate hope that he would choose them over his empire. Sarah had created this impossible moment, this choice between love and everything he'd built. You have 24 hours to decide, Blackwood said, turning toward the door. Oh, and Harrison, don't try to run. I have people watching every airport, every highway, every safe house you think you have. The boys belong to me, and I always collect what's mine. As Blackwood and his men disappeared into the night, Bobby sank to his knees, the weight of impossible choice crushing down on him like a collapsing building. The hours after Blackwood's departure passed in a blur of security arrangements and desperate phone calls. Bobby's lawyers worked through the night, searching for loopholes, while Rodriguez coordinated with federal contacts, trying to find some legal way to challenge Blackwood's claims. But as dawn broke over Chicago, painting the mansion's windows gold and red, Bobby found himself drawn to the one place in the house he'd avoided for 6 years, Sarah's art studio in the converted attic. The room smelled of old paint and dust, frozen in time like a museum exhibit. Sarah's easel still held her final painting, a portrait of 2 blonde boys playing in a garden that looked suspiciously like the one behind the mansion. How had he never noticed before? Mr. Bobby? Tommy's voice came from the doorway. He and Billy stood there in their new pajamas, looking lost and small in the vast house. We couldn't sleep, Billy added. Maria said we could find you up here. Bobby gestured for them to come in, his heart breaking at their careful movements, the way they seemed to expect rejection at any moment. This was your mother's special place, he said softly. She painted when she was sad or happy or confused about life. Tommy approached the easel, his eyes wide. She painted us? Many times, apparently. Bobby pulled dust covers off other canvases, revealing a secret gallery of the twins at different ages. Sarah feeding them as babies, Sarah reading to them as toddlers, Sarah watching them sleep, her face radiating a love so fierce it seemed to glow from the canvas. She visited us, Billy whispered. Not often, but sometimes. She pretended to be a social worker or a teacher doing evaluations. We always knew, though. She smelled like flowers and safety. Bobby found a letter taped to the back of the final painting. Another message from Sarah, written in her careful hand. My dearest Bobby, if you're reading this with the boys beside you, then the worst has happened and Marcus has found us all. I need you to know that every choice I made was to protect you. The boys are innocent in this. They're victims of my desperation, not accomplices to it. The letter continued. There's something Marcus doesn't know, something I discovered too late to matter. Check the loose floorboard beneath my easel. What's hidden there might be our salvation or our destruction. I pray you'll forgive me for the burden I'm placing on your shoulders. Bobby knelt and pried up the indicated board. Inside was a small metal box containing USB drives, photographs and documents that made his blood run cold. Financial records showing Blackwood's involvement in human trafficking. Photos of children who disappeared from the foster system. Audio recordings of phone calls discussing the sale of children to overseas buyers. Dear God, Bobby breathed. Sarah was gathering evidence. Tommy crept closer, his face pale. What is it, Mr. Bobby? Your mother was trying to stop him, Bobby said, his voice filled with sudden understanding. She didn't just sacrifice herself to save me. She was building a case to destroy him completely. But as he examined the evidence, Bobby realized the terrible truth. Sarah had been murdered, not for betraying Blackwood personally, but for threatening to expose an operation that generated millions in profit. And now that same evidence could either save the boys or get them all killed. The choice was no longer between his fortune and his heart. It was between justice and survival. Bobby spent the morning making copies of Sarah's evidence, his hands shaking as he realized the scope of what she'd uncovered. Blackwood wasn't just a local crime boss. He was part of an international network that treated children like commodities. The boys weren't just his biological sons, they were potential products in a system that saw human lives as inventory. "Rodriguez," he called to his security chief, who was monitoring feeds from cameras positioned around the property. "I need you to contact Agent Sarah Mitchell at the FBI. Tell her we have evidence of a federal crime that goes back 7 years. Sir, are you sure? If we involve federal authorities and this goes public, the boys' safety is more important than my reputation." Bobby sealed the evidence in a fireproof safe. "Besides, hiding this information got Sarah killed. I won't make the same mistake." But even as he spoke, Bobby's phone rang with an unknown number. The voice that answered chilled him to the bone. "I hope you're not doing anything foolish, Harrison." It was Blackwood, his tone casual despite the implied threat. "I have eyes on your property, you know, and on certain federal buildings where you might be tempted to take evidence that doesn't belong to you. How did you—" "I told you. I've been watching for months. Did you really think Sarah was the only one capable of planning ahead?" Blackwood's laughter was like ice cracking. "Check your email. I think you'll find my latest offer compelling." Bobby's laptop chimed with an incoming message. The attached video made his knees buckle. It showed Tommy and Billy playing in the mansion's garden, but the timestamp was from this morning, filmed from a position that should have been impossible given Rodriguez's security perimeter. "We're not as safe as you think," Bobby whispered to Rodriguez, who immediately began barking orders into his radio. The second attachment was worse. Photos of children who'd crossed Blackwood before. Some were found weeks later in distant countries, sold to buyers who saw them as objects. Others were never found at all. "The boys are special to me," Blackwood's voice continued through the phone. "My own flesh and blood, but business is business, Harrison. If I can't have them as heirs, they'll serve other purposes. The international market pays very well for blonde, blue-eyed American children." Bobby's vision blurred with rage. "You sick bastard. Practical businessman. You have until sunset to transfer the funds, or Tommy and Billy begin a very different kind of life. One where their memories of safety and love become just another commodity to be stripped away." The line went dead, leaving Bobby staring at images that would haunt him forever. In the garden, he could see the twins playing with Maria's dog, their laughter carrying through the windows like music. They had no idea that their entire future hung in the balance of decisions made by adults who'd never asked for their consent. Rodriguez appeared at his shoulder, his face grim. "Sir, we have a problem. The perimeter has been compromised in 3 locations. Professional work. Whoever did this has military training." "How many men do we have?" 6 on site, 12 more en route. "But sir, if this is a federal matter involving child trafficking, we should evacuate the boys now and worry about jurisdiction later." Bobby looked at Sarah's painting of the twins, seeing not just children, but symbols of every innocent life that Blackwood had destroyed. The evidence Sarah had died gathering could stop him forever, but only if Bobby was willing to risk the lives of the boys she'd died protecting. The trap was closing from all sides, and time was running out. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mansion as Bobby gathered Tommy and Billy in Sarah's studio. The boys sensed something was wrong. Children always do, and their faces carried that careful blankness that came from years of adapting to adult crises, beyond their control. "Boys," Bobby began, kneeling to their eye level, "I need to tell you something important about your father. Your biological father. Tommy's small hand found Billy's, and they stood united in the way that only twins can be. We know about the bad man, Tommy said quietly. Mama told us he was our blood father, but that blood doesn't make family. Love does. She said you were our real father, Billy added, his chin raised in defiance, the one who would fight for us when the time came. Bobby's heart swelled with fierce protectiveness, but before he could respond, Rodriguez burst into the room, his face pale with urgency. Sir, we have multiple vehicles approaching from all directions. This isn't a negotiation. It's a full assault. Through the studio windows, Bobby could see black SUVs surrounding the property like circling wolves. But something was wrong with the picture. These weren't Blackwood's men. The vehicles bore federal license plates, and agents in FBI windbreakers were taking positions around the mansion. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the news. Your evidence arrived at exactly the right time. A friend. With trembling fingers, Bobby turned on the studio's television. Breaking news filled the screen. Federal raids underway across Chicago in massive child trafficking investigation. Evidence provided by anonymous source leads to arrests of key figures in international network. The reporter continued. Marcus Blackwood, thought dead for 3 years, was taken into custody this morning, along with 14 associates. The investigation, codenamed Operation Guardian Angel, has been underway for months. Bobby stared at the screen in shock. But he was just here. He called me this morning. Rodriguez was already on his radio, coordinating with the agents outside. Sir, Agent Mitchell is requesting permission to enter. She says she has information about the boy's status. Agent Sarah Mitchell was a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much but hadn't let it break her. She entered the studio with 2 other agents, her expression gentle as she looked at the twins. Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry for the deception, but we needed Blackwood to believe he still had leverage over you. We've been monitoring his communications for weeks, waiting for him to reveal the location of his offshore accounts and international contacts. The phone call this morning was made from federal custody. We had him call you to maintain the illusion while our teams moved on his associates worldwide. Agent Mitchell knelt beside the twins. Tommy, Billy, you're safe now. The man who hurt your mother can never hurt anyone again. Bobby's legs gave out, and he sank into Sarah's chair. But the evidence. How did you? Agent Mitchell smiled. Your wife was an FBI informant, Mr. Harrison. She contacted us 6 months before her death with preliminary evidence of Blackwood's trafficking network. Her final months were spent gathering the information we needed to build an ironclad case. She was working with you. She was dying, and she knew it. The cancer was real, but it was secondary to what she saw as her true mission, protecting not just her own children, but all the children Blackwood had victimized. The agent's voice softened. Her last words to our handler were about making sure the boys found their way to you when it was safe. Bobby looked at Tommy and Billy, understanding flooding through him like sunrise. She planned all of this. Every detail. The foster placements that kept them safe but moving, the timing of their arrival at your building, even the evidence hidden in this room. She knew you'd find it when you needed it most. Tommy stepped forward, his small face serious. So we're really safe? The bad man can't take us away? Never again, Agent Mitchell promised. And Mr. Harrison, the federal prosecutor wants to discuss witness protection, but honestly, with Blackwood's entire network in custody, you shouldn't need it. Sarah's evidence was comprehensive. Bobby pulled both boys into his arms, feeling pieces of his heart heal that he hadn't realized were broken. Sarah hadn't just sacrificed herself, she'd orchestrated their salvation from beyond the grave. There's one more thing, Agent Mitchell said, producing a sealed envelope. She left this for you. Instructions that she be read only after Blackwood was in custody. Bobby's hands shook as he opened Sarah's final letter. My beloved Bobby, if you're reading this, then justice has been served and our boys are finally safe. I know you'll be angry about the deceptions, but I need you to understand, everything I did was so that someday you could hold our sons without fear. They are ours now, in every way that matters. Love them as I couldn't. Raise them as we dreamed. And forgive me for the path we had to walk to get here. 3 weeks later, Bobby stood in the mansion's garden, watching Tommy and Billy chase Maria's dog across the lawn. The late December sun cast everything in golden light, and for the first time in 7 years, the house felt like a home instead of a mausoleum. The legal paperwork had been surprisingly straightforward. With Blackwood in federal custody and facing life imprisonment, his parental rights had been terminated immediately. The boys' birth certificates were being amended to reflect Bobby as their adoptive father, a formality that meant everything and nothing, since they'd already claimed each other as family. "Daddy Bobby!" Tommy called out, the title that had once made him cry now filling him with joy. "Come play with us." "In a minute," Bobby called back, then turned to Rodriguez, who was updating him on the final security arrangements. "You're sure we don't need the full detail anymore?" Agent Mitchell confirmed it this morning. "With Blackwood's network dismantled and his assets seized, there's no remaining threat. The boys can have a normal life now." Normal. Bobby tested the word in his mind like a foreign language. After 7 years of grief and 3 weeks of terror, normal seemed like an impossible dream. "There is one thing, sir," Rodriguez added. "The media attention is likely to be intense once the story breaks nationally. The boys might want to consider counseling to help them process everything." Bobby nodded. Tommy and Billy had shown remarkable resilience, but they'd lived through trauma that would mark anyone. "I've already spoken to Dr. Sarah Martinez at Children's Hospital. She specializes in helping kids who've been through the foster system. And yourself, sir, this has been a lot." Bobby looked at Sarah's portrait, visible through the study window. For weeks he'd felt angry at her deceptions, betrayed by her secrets. Now he felt only gratitude for a love so fierce it had reached beyond death to protect them all. "I think I'm exactly where I need to be," he said. That evening, as Bobby tucked the twins into their beds, real beds in a real home where they would wake up tomorrow and every day after, Tommy grabbed his hand. "Daddy Bobby, are we really going to stay here forever?" "As long as you want to," Bobby promised. "This is your home now. No one can take you away from here or from me." Billy sat up in his bed across the room. "Will you tell us stories about Mama, about when she was happy?" Bobby's throat tightened. "Every night, if you want. She had so many happy moments, and now you're part of making new ones." As he turned off the lights, Tommy's sleepy voice followed him to the door. "Daddy Bobby, I think Mama is watching us from heaven, and I think she's smiling." Bobby paused in the doorway, looking back at the 2 small figures tucked safely into beds that would be theirs for as long as they wanted them. "I think you're right, Tommy. I think she's smiling too." Walking downstairs to his study, Bobby sat down at his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. For the first time in 6 years, he had something important to write. Not a business letter or a contract, but something far more valuable. "Dear Sarah," he began, "today was a good day. The boys laughed until their sides hurt, and Tommy lost his first tooth. Billy is reading at a 4th grade level already, just like you always said he would. They ask about you every day, and I tell them stories that make them proud to be your sons. I know you can't answer, but I needed you to know we're going to be okay. All of us, together." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the mansion grounds in pristine white. Inside, a family that had been broken apart by violence and lies was finally truly whole. 6 months later, Bobby Harrison stood in the same spot where he'd first encountered Tommy and Billy. But everything had changed. The downtown Chicago streets bustled with spring energy, and where once he'd seen only concrete and steel, he now noticed details that had escaped him for years. Children playing in pocket parks, families window shopping, the simple joy of people living their lives without fear. Today was special, the final hearing for the boy's official adoption. The legal proceedings had been a formality, but Bobby wanted to mark the moment properly. He'd closed Harrison Holdings for the day, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago, and taken the twins to breakfast at Giuseppe's, the restaurant where Sarah had first been threatened by Blackwood. "Daddy Bobby," Tommy said, his mouth full of pancakes, "are you sad that we're not really your blood children?" The question caught Bobby off guard, though it shouldn't have. The boys had been in therapy with Dr. Martinez, processing years of instability and the recent trauma of learning their true parentage. She'd warned him that they might struggle with questions of belonging, of worthiness. "Tommy," Bobby said carefully, setting down his coffee cup and giving the boy his full attention, "let me tell you something important. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. Every single day I choose to be your father and you choose to be my sons. That makes us more family than people who just happen to share DNA." Billy looked up from his orange juice, his serious blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, studying Bobby's face. "But what if someday you change your mind? What if we're too much trouble?" Bobby's heart broke a little, understanding that this fear came from years of being moved from home to home, never quite belonging anywhere. He slid out of his side of the booth and squeezed in next to the boys, pulling them both close. "Boys, listen to me very carefully. I loved your mother more than anything in the world, and she's gone. But loving you both doesn't make me miss her less. It makes me feel closer to her. You're not replacements for what I lost. You're gifts she left for me to find when I was ready." "Really?" Tommy whispered. "Really? And do you know what the best part is? I get to discover who you are every single day. Tommy, you have your mother's kindness and her love of art. Billy, you have her intelligence and her fierce loyalty. But you also have your own unique selves that I'm still learning about. That's not a burden. It's an adventure." After breakfast, they walked to the courthouse where Agent Mitchell waited with the final paperwork. The federal investigation had concluded with 17 convictions and the recovery of 43 children from trafficking situations around the world. Sarah's evidence had been the cornerstone of the entire operation. "Mr. Harrison," Agent Mitchell said, shaking his hand, "I wanted you to know that the Sarah Matthews Foundation officially launched yesterday. The FBI is partnering with child welfare organizations to implement early warning systems based on the methods your wife developed." Bobby smiled, knowing Sarah would have loved that her work would continue protecting children long after Blackwood was gone. She always said that one person could make a difference if they were willing to pay the price. She paid it, sir, and so did you. The adoption hearing itself took less than an hour. Judge Rebecca Santos, a grandmother who'd presided over thousands of family cases, smiled as she signed the final documents. "Mr. Harrison, Thomas, and William, it's my pleasure to declare that you are now officially and legally a family. Your adoption is finalized, and nothing can change that. Congratulations." Tommy and Billy cheered, hugging Bobby with the fierce joy of children who finally truly belonged somewhere. As they left the courthouse, Bobby felt Sarah's presence so strongly it was almost physical, not sad or haunting, but warm and approving. That evening, the family gathered in Sarah's old studio, which Bobby had converted into a combination art room and homework space. The walls displayed the boys' drawings alongside Sarah's paintings, creating a gallery that celebrated both past and future. "Daddy Bobby," Billy said, adding careful details to a watercolor painting of their house, "I dreamed about Mama last night." "Oh, what did she say?" She didn't say anything. She just watched us playing in the garden, and she was smiling. Then she waved goodbye, like she was going somewhere far away but happy about it. Tommy nodded, his own painting showing a family of 3 figures under a bright sun. I had the same dream. She looked peaceful, like she wasn't worried about us anymore. Bobby studied their artwork, seeing not just childish enthusiasm, but genuine talent inherited from their mother. I think maybe she was saying goodbye because she knows you're safe now. She doesn't have to worry about protecting you anymore. That's my job now. And we'll protect you too, Tommy declared with 7-year-old seriousness. Families protect each other. Yes, they do, Bobby agreed, hanging both paintings in places of honor. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Bobby sat in his study, writing in the journal he'd started keeping. Letters to Sarah that he'd never send, but somehow needed to write. Dear Sarah, he wrote, today made it official, but we've been a family for months now. Tommy lost another tooth and insists the tooth fairy pays better rates at our house than at foster homes. Billy is reading Harry Potter and wants to know if we can get a dog that's more magical than Maria's poodle. They're smart, funny, kind, and absolutely fearless, just like their mother. I know you can't answer these letters, but I hope you know that your sacrifice wasn't just about saving them, or me, or stopping Blackwood. You created something beautiful from something terrible. You turned a tragedy into a love story. The boys still miss you, and they always will. But they're not haunted by your absence anymore. They're strengthened by your love. Every day, they become a little more themselves and a little less afraid. They're going to be extraordinary men someday, and it's because of the foundation you gave them, even when you couldn't be there to build on it. Thank you for trusting me with them. Thank you for believing I could love them as you did. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the greatest love requires the greatest sacrifice, but that sacrifice can bloom into something even more beautiful than what was lost. We're going to be okay, Sarah. All of us. Together. Bobby sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in the growing collection in his desk drawer, a one-sided correspondence that somehow felt like the most important writing he'd ever done. Outside, spring rain began to fall on the garden, where Tommy and Billy would play tomorrow and the next day, and for all the days to come. Inside the mansion that had once echoed with loneliness, a family slept peacefully, bound not by blood or law, but by love strong enough to survive death itself. The story that had begun with a chance encounter on a cold December night had become something Sarah could never have imagined when she made her first desperate choice to protect the man she loved. It had become a legacy of love that would echo through generations, proving that sometimes the most broken things can be mended into something even more beautiful than they were before. And in the garden where Sarah had once painted her secret children, flowers that had been dormant all winter began to bloom again, reaching toward the sun with the same fierce determination that had driven a mother's love beyond the grave and into the light of a new beginning.